Bandits traded a captive blind girl for 2 bits, until a Modoc traveler grasped her fingers and whispered, "No chains can hold what the earth remembers." Cripple Creek, Colorado Territory. Early winter 1874. The mountain wind cut through the settlement like a blade, carrying the scent of pine smoke and rotting timber. In the muddy square between the assay office and a half-collapsed mercantile, a crowd of men gathered around a wooden platform hastily constructed from minecart rails and warped planks. The sky hung low and gray, threatening snow that would trap anyone foolish enough to linger in these heights past November. On that platform stood Autumn Merrick, barefoot despite the frost that crept across the ground like skeletal fingers. Her ankles were bound with frayed rope that had worn her skin raw, leaving streaks of dried blood along her calves. A filthy burlap sack covered her head, tied loosely at the neck with twine that had frayed from her attempts to breathe easier beneath its suffocating weight. Her dress, once a cream-colored calico that her mother had sewn with careful stitches, hung in tatters around her frame, stained with trail dust. Dried blood from cuts she couldn't see to tend, and the marks of rough hands that had shoved her from camp to camp. She stood perfectly still, hands loose at her sides, not fighting, not pleading, simply waiting with the patience of someone who had learned that resistance only brought worse. Her breathing was shallow and controlled, the kind of breathing that came from trying to make yourself smaller. Invisible, forgotten, 3 bandits lounged near the platform edge, passing a bottle of rot-gut whiskey between them with the casual cruelty of men who had long since stopped seeing other humans as anything more than opportunities. The leader, a thick-necked man named Virgil Cass with a scar running from eyebrow to jawline like a canyon carved by violence, spat tobacco juice into the dirt and called out to the sparse crowd, "All right, you miserable sons of the frontier. Listen up," Virgil shouted, his voice rough as gravel scraped over stone. "Got ourselves a piece of merchandise here. Blind as a cave fish, quiet as a tombstone, and already broken in. Won't cause you no trouble because she can't even see trouble coming. Won't run because she don't know which way leads where. Perfect for someone who needs hands that work and a mouth that don't complain." Laughter rippled through the gathering, harsh and ugly. Men in worn canvas coats and sweat-stained hats nudged each other, making crude jokes about what a blind woman might be good for. A few miners from the nearby claims stepped closer, curiosity overcoming their initial disinterest. One man, toothless and reeking of sulfur from the deep shaft work, called out, "What's wrong with her eyes?" "Disease? Don't want no plague girl in my camp." "Ain't disease," Virgil said, waving his hand dismissively. "Born that way, near as we can tell. Eyes don't track, don't see nothing but dark. Found her wandering the Sangre de Cristo past 3 weeks back, half-starved and talking to ghosts. Figured she'd fetch something at market, even if it's just enough for a hot meal and a warm woman for the night." The second bandit, a wiry man named Pike with nervous hands and darting eyes that never settled on anything for long, laughed and added, "She don't eat much. Don't complain and don't run. We kept her tied up for 3 weeks and she never once tried to escape. That's the kind of obedience you can't train into most women." This one came pre-broken. The third bandit, younger and meaner, kicked at the platform edge, making it shake. Autumn swayed but didn't fall, her bare feet finding balance on the uneven planks. 2 bits, Virgil announced, holding up a $quarter coin so it caught the weak sunlight filtering through the clouds. 25 cents. That's all I'm asking. Less than a hot meal, less than a bottle of decent whiskey. Hell, it's less than most of you spend on cards in a night. Someone here's gotta need a pair of hands, even if they're attached to damaged goods." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few men looked at Autumn with something that might have been pity, but pity didn't spend, and most turned away. The wind picked up, howling down from the peaks like the cry of something ancient and angry, and the girl on the platform swayed slightly, her bound feet struggling for balance on the uneven planks. Her hands, pale and thin, clenched once, then released. She had learned not to show fear, not to give them the satisfaction. "Come on now," Virgil pressed, his voice taking on an edge of impatience. "Somebody's got to want her. She can scrub floors, haul water, mend clothes if you guide her hands to it. Hell, she can warm a bed as well as any woman. And she won't see your ugly face while she does it. More laughter, but darker now. The kind that carried threat beneath it." From the back of the crowd, near the hitching post where a paint horse stood with distinctive Modoc blanket work draped across its back, a figure moved forward. The crowd sensed her before they saw her, the way animals sense a storm before the first drop of rain falls. Conversations died mid-sentence. Men stepped aside, some from respect, most from the kind of uneasy prejudice that frontier towns wore like a second skin. Onawa Grey Wolf walked with the deliberate grace of someone who understood that every step carried weight. That movement itself could be a statement of intent. She wore traditional buckskin leggings beneath a long wool coat dyed deep blue, her dark hair braided with strips of red cloth and eagle feathers that marked her as Modoc, as someone who walked between worlds. Her face bore the high cheekbones and strong features of her heritage, and a thin scar ran along her left temple, pale against her bronze skin, a reminder of survival earned in blood. At her hip hung a knife in a beaded sheath, and across her back, a rifle wrapped in oiled leather. The crowd parted instinctively as she approached, creating a corridor of bodies that led directly to the platform. Onawa paid them no attention. Her eyes, dark as obsidian and just as sharp, fixed on the girl standing on the platform. She saw the rope burns, the trembling that Autumn tried to hide, the way her head tilted slightly to track sounds since sight had been denied her. She stopped 3 feet from Virgil Cass, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she simply stood there, letting the silence build. Then she reached into the leather pouch at her belt, withdrew 2 coins, and held them up between her fingers, letting them catch the light. She studied them as if considering their worth, then dropped them into the dirt at the bandits' feet where they landed with a sound like a judgment being passed. 2 bits, she said, her voice low and steady, carrying the faint accent of someone who spoke 3 languages and dreamed in all of them. "I will take her." Virgil blinked, clearly not expecting this particular buyer. He glanced at his companions, then back at Onawa, suspicion narrowing his eyes. He'd seen Modoc traders before, but usually they kept to themselves, traded furs and herbs for tools and cloth, then disappeared back into the mountains. This was different. He's sure about that. Modoc woman buying a white girl. Folks around here might have opinions about that kind of thing. Folks around here sold a blind woman for the price of bad liquor. Onawa replied without emotion, her voice carrying across the square. "Their opinions hold no weight with me. The coins are there. The trade is made," Pike snickered, nervous energy making him shift from foot to foot, but Virgil bent down and scooped up the coins. He tested them between his teeth, the way men did when they trusted nothing and no one, nodded slowly, then gestured toward Autumn with a wave that dismissed her like refuse. "She's yours then. Don't come crying when you figure out she's more trouble than worth. Girl's got nothing but bad luck following her. Parents died of cholera last year. Wagon train left her behind when they figured out she was blind. Been passed from camp to camp ever since. We did her a favor really, keeping her fed these past weeks." Onawa's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Cold and sharp as winter starlight. Your kindness is noted," she said in a tone that made kindness sound like the worst insult imaginable. She stepped onto the platform, her movements calm and unhurried, deliberate in a way that commanded attention. She reached up and carefully untied the burlap sack covering Autumn's head, pulling it away gently, slowly, as if removing a bandage from a wound. The girl beneath had auburn hair matted with dirt and sweat, a face pale and thin with hunger, cheekbones too prominent, lips cracked from dehydration. Her eyes were the color of winter sky, pale blue and clouded. Staring straight ahead but seeing nothing. Tracking no movement, focusing on no point. For a moment, Autumn stood frozen, her breath coming faster. Uncertain what new cruelty this change of ownership might bring. She had learned that every hand extended was a hand that would eventually strike. But then she felt fingers, roughened by work but gentle in their touch, carefully working at the ropes binding her ankles. Onawa knelt on the platform, taking care not to pull against the raw skin where the rope had chafed for days. "Can you stand?" Onawa asked quietly, her voice pitched for Autumn's ears alone. Autumn nodded, just once, not trusting her voice. "Then walk with me. I will guide you. You will not fall." Onawa took Autumn's hand, not gripping her wrist like a possession, not yanking her forward like livestock, but holding her fingers the way one might help a friend across uncertain ground. She guided the blind girl down from the platform, steadying her when her bare feet touched the cold mud, supporting her weight when her legs, cramped from standing too long, threatened to buckle. The crowd watched in silence as Onawa led Autumn toward the paint horse. Some watched with confusion, others with barely concealed contempt, a few with something that might have been shame, though none would voice it. Onawa ignored them all. She pulled a spare blanket from her pack, thick wool woven with traditional patterns, and wrapped it around the girl's shoulders. Then she retrieved a pair of worn moccasins, soft deerskin lined with rabbit fur, and knelt to help Autumn put them on. The simple act of someone touching her feet with care, sliding the moccasins on gently, adjusting them for comfort, broke something inside Autumn. A small sound escaped her throat, half sob, half gasp. "Why?" Autumn whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse and screaming that no one had answered. "Why would you buy me? What do you want from me?" Onawa looked up at her, though she knew the girl couldn't see her expression. Still, there was something in the way Autumn tilted her head, as if she could sense intention through tone alone. "Because you were not meant to be bought," Onawa said simply. "And because the earth does not forget those who suffer upon it. You are standing on Ute land, near Modoc trading routes, on ground that remembers every injustice. I heard it whisper your name on the wind." Autumn's breath caught, her clouded eyes suddenly bright with tears. "You don't know my name? Then tell me." "Autumn." "Autumn Merrick." Onawa rose to her feet, still holding Autumn's hand. "I am Onawa Greywolf, daughter of the Modoc people, walker of the high places, keeper of old paths. You are free now, Autumn Merrick. No chains can hold what the earth remembers. No men can sell what was never theirs to own." The words settled over Autumn like the blanket around her shoulders, warm and unexpected and so foreign she almost couldn't accept them. For the first time in 3 weeks, tears slipped down her cheeks, cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face. And she made no move to hide them. Onawa helped her onto the paint horse, guiding her hands to the saddle horn, positioning her legs carefully. Then she swung up behind her with practiced ease, one arm circling Autumn's waist to keep her steady but not confining, protective but not possessive. She turned the horse away from Cripple Creek, away from the staring crowd and the sneering bandits, and guided them toward the tree line where the pines grew thick and the world grew quiet. Behind them, Virgil pocketed the coins and turned to his companions. "Crazy Modoc woman. Probably wants a slave to do her hunting and cooking." But Pike, watching the two figures disappear into the trees, shook his head slowly. "I don't think that's what that was. Did you see the way she looked at us? Like we were the animals. We got paid, didn't we? That's all that matters." But even as Virgil said it, the coins felt heavier in his pocket. Like they carried weight beyond their silver, they rode for over an hour in silence, climbing higher into the mountains where the air thinned and grew sharp as broken glass in the lungs. The temperature dropped with each 100 feet of elevation, and snow appeared in patches between the trees, growing thicker as they ascended. Autumn held tight to the horse's mane, her body rigid with uncertainty. Every sound made her flinch, every shift in direction brought tension to her shoulders. She had learned to navigate by sound in the year since her sight had failed completely, but these were unfamiliar sounds. This was terrain she couldn't map, finally. Onawa slowed the horse near a clearing where a stream cut through the rocks, its water running clear and cold, singing over stones worn smooth by centuries of flow. She dismounted first, her boots crunching in the thin layer of snow, then reached up to help Autumn down. The girl's legs nearly gave way when her feet touched ground, stiff from riding. "There's water here," Onawa said, her hand supporting Autumn's elbow. "And flat ground. We will rest. The horse needs water, and you need to drink." She guided Autumn to a fallen log, ancient and smoothed by weather, and helped her sit. Then she knelt by the stream, filled a tin cup with water so cold it burned, and brought it back. She pressed the cup into Autumn's hands, wrapping the girl's fingers around it. "Drink. It is clean. Mountain water, snow melt from the peaks." Autumn took the cup with trembling hands and drank deeply. The cold water shocking against her parched throat, but clean. Cleaner than anything she'd tasted in weeks. When she finished, she held the cup in her lap and spoke, her voice stronger now. "Those men took me from a wagon train 3 weeks ago. We were heading to Denver. My parents had saved for 2 years to take me to a doctor there, someone who might be able to help my eyes. I wasn't born blind. It came on slowly, over months, like curtains closing one by one until there was only darkness." Onawa listened without interrupting. Refilling the cup from the stream, the bandits attacked at dawn. When the families were still sleeping, they killed the wagon master and his son, scattered the other wagons, took whatever they wanted. They took me because I couldn't run fast enough, couldn't see where to hide, couldn't fight back. Virgil said I was worthless, that even whores had more use than a blind girl, but that someone might buy me cheap enough for labor. Her voice broke slightly, but she continued, as if the words had been dammed up too long and needed release. "They kept me tied in their camp, fed me moldy bread and water when they remembered, threatened me when I made noise. Pike said if I screamed, he'd cut out my tongue and I'd be blind and mute, and then I'd really be worthless. So I stopped making sounds. I stopped hoping someone would help. I stopped believing anyone saw me as anything but a burden my parents had been foolish to keep alive." Onawa reached out and gently took Autumn's hand, her grip firm and warm. "You are not a burden. You are a person who has survived men who saw you as less than human. That makes you stronger than they will ever understand. Survival is its own kind of sight." Autumn turned her face toward Onawa's voice, her clouded eyes seeking something she couldn't see. "Why did you really buy me? Please, the truth. What do you want?" Onawa considered her words carefully, knowing that trust, once broken, could rarely be repaired. "I will tell you a story, and then you will understand. I was 12 winters old when the soldiers came to our village in California. They said we had broken treaty terms by hunting beyond our boundaries. They said we had stolen cattle that had wandered onto our land. They did not ask for truth. They brought fire." She paused, her hand still holding Autumn's. "I survived by hiding in the river reeds, breathing through a hollow stem while they searched the banks. I heard my mother calling my name. I heard her stop calling. When I finally came out, when the soldiers had gone and the fires had burned to ash, everyone I loved was gone. 43 people. 12 of them children." Autumn's grip on Onawa's hand tightened. "I learned to survive alone. I learned to trade, to track, to move between worlds like a ghost. I speak English, Modoc, and enough Spanish to bargain in the border towns. I go where I choose because I belong nowhere and everywhere. No man owns me. No law binds me. And when I saw you standing on that platform, I saw myself at 12, alone and terrified, with no one willing to see my worth beyond what I could provide them." She stood, still holding Autumn's hand. pulling her gently to her feet. I want nothing from you except that you heal and remember you are worth more than 2 bits, more than any price. I bought your freedom, not your service. What you do with that freedom is yours to decide. Autumn was quiet for a long moment, processing words she had never expected to hear. Where are we going? To my winter camp. It is another day's ride, higher in the mountains where few men travel. There is a cabin there, built by a French trapper who died 5 winters ago. I use it when the snows come heavy. You will be safe there while you heal, while you remember how to be more than afraid. And then what happens to me? Onawa smiled, though Autumn couldn't see it, the expression softening the hard lines that survival had carved into her face. Then you decide. Stay if the mountains suit you. Go if they do not. Find your family if they live. Build a new life if they do not. The choice will be yours and yours alone. I ask nothing of you except that you heal and remember you are worth defending. For the first time since the bandits had taken her, since her world had gone dark and terrifying, Autumn felt something other than fear. It wasn't quite hope, not yet, but it was close. It was possibility. They rode on as the sun began its descent behind the peaks, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of gold and crimson that Autumn couldn't see but could feel in the changing temperature of the air, in the way the light warmed her face before fading. She held onto Onawa, her body gradually relaxing against the steady rhythm of the horse's gait, against the solid presence of someone who had chosen protection over profit. Behind them, Cripple Creek faded into the distance, and with it, the men who had seen her as nothing. Ahead lay uncertainty, winter storms, and a life she couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in weeks, it was an uncertainty Autumn chose to face rather than endure. As darkness fell and the first stars emerged in the clear mountain sky, Onawa began to sing softly in Modoc, a traveling song, a song of journeys and homecomings. Autumn listened, letting the unfamiliar words wash over her like the stream water. Clean and cold and somehow healing, the cabin appeared through the trees like something from a half-remembered dream. Its log walls dark with age and weather, smoke curling from a stone chimney that spoke of recent fire. Snow had drifted against the northern wall, and icicles hung from the eave like teeth. But the structure stood solid, defiant against the mountain winter. Onawa guided the paint horse to a small lean-to shelter beside the cabin, dismounted and helped Autumn down. The girl's legs trembled from the long ride, and Onawa steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. 12 steps forward, Onawa said quietly. The ground is level, but there are stones. I will guide you. She took Autumn's hand and led her carefully across the clearing. Autumn counted the steps, her free hand extended slightly, learning to feel the air for obstacles the way Onawa had begun teaching her during their rest stops. When they reached the door, Onawa placed Autumn's palm against the rough wood. This is the door. It opens inward. There is a latch here. She guided Autumn's fingers to the iron mechanism. Lift and push. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke, dried herbs hanging from the rafters, and something else, something like cedar and sage. Onawa led Autumn to a chair near the hearth where embers still glowed from a fire she'd built 2 days prior before riding down to the settlements for supplies. Sit. I will build the fire higher and bring in our things. Autumn sat, her hands gripping the chair arms, listening to Onawa move with practiced efficiency. She heard the door open and close 3 times, heard bundles being set down, heard the crackle as Onawa fed the fire with split logs. Warmth began to spread through this small space, reaching Autumn's face like gentle hands. The cabin is 1 room, Onawa said, her voice coming from different locations as she moved, unpacking. The hearth is where you sit now. To your left, 4 steps, is my sleeping platform, built against the wall. To your right, 6 steps, is a table with 2 chairs. Behind you, 8 steps is the door we entered. Along the far wall are shelves with food stores, herbs, medicines. Autumn turned her head, trying to build a map in her mind. Where will I sleep? I will build a second platform tonight on the opposite wall from mine. For now you will use mine, and I will sleep near the fire. No, Autumn said quickly. I can't take your bed. You've already done too much. Onawa knelt beside the chair, her voice level and firm. You have spent 3 weeks sleeping on cold ground, tied like an animal. You will sleep in a bed with furs and blankets. This is not kindness, Autumn. This is what should have been yours all along. Do not argue. The authority in her tone left no room for debate, but it wasn't cruel. It was the kind of firmness that came from someone who understood that accepting help was sometimes harder than suffering alone. That night, Autumn lay on the sleeping platform, wrapped in furs that smelled of wood smoke and winter. And for the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. Across the cabin, Onawa sat by the fire, her rifle across her knees, watching the door with eyes that had learned long ago that safety was something you guarded, not something given. The days that followed developed a rhythm. Each morning, Onawa woke before dawn and rebuilt the fire, then began breakfast. The sounds woke Autumn, who had learned to sleep light, her ears always listening for danger. But these sounds were different, peaceful, the sounds of someone caring for a space they called home. Good morning, Onawa would say when she heard Autumn stir. There is warm water in the basin for washing. 6 steps from your bed, straight ahead. Autumn learned to navigate by counting steps, by the feel of different surfaces under her feet, by the way sound echoed differently in corners versus open spaces. Onawa taught her patiently, never rushing, never showing frustration when Autumn bumped into things or knocked over a cup. The table has a rough spot on this corner, Onawa would say, placing Autumn's hand on it. Feel it? That is your marker. When you find this corner, you know where you are. Slowly, the cabin became less of a mystery and more of a place Autumn could exist in without constant fear of collision. She learned that the water bucket sat to the left of the door, that the drying herbs hung low enough to brush her head if she walked too tall near the shelves, that 3 steps from the hearth would bring her to the warmth without getting too close to the flames. One morning, nearly a week after their arrival, Onawa placed something in Autumn's hands. It was wooden, smooth, about as long as her forearm with a curved handle at one end. What is this? A walking stick. I carved it from juniper. The wood is strong but light. The bottom has a rounded end so it will not catch on uneven ground. When you walk, you sweep it ahead of you like this, Onawa demonstrated, guiding Autumn's hands through the motion. It will tell you what is in your path before you reach it. Outside, it will be your eyes. Autumn's fingers traced the smooth wood, finding the places where Onawa had shaped it, sanded it, carved a simple pattern near the handle. You made this for me? Yes, why? Onawa was quiet for a moment, because you should not have to depend on my hand to walk. You should have your own way of moving through the world. That afternoon, Onawa took Autumn outside for the first time since they'd arrived. The cold hit like a physical thing, sharp and clean, and Autumn gasped. The air is thin here, Onawa said. We are high in the mountains. Breathe slowly until your body adjusts. She guided Autumn away from the cabin, into the clearing where the snow had been packed down by her daily walks to the lean-to and the woodpile. Autumn held the walking stick awkwardly at first, unsure how much to trust it. Sweep it forward, feel for obstacles. The ground here is level. I cleared the stones last week. Autumn took a tentative step, then another. The stick tapped against the packed snow, telling her the path was clear. She moved slowly, counting steps again, building a new map. 10 steps from the cabin door to the center of the clearing. 15 more to where Onawa said the tree line began. Stop, Onawa said. Feel the air. It is different here. Cooler. The trees block the sun. This is the edge of the clearing. Do not go past this point without me. The forest is not kind to those who wander without sight. Autumn nodded, memorizing the feeling of the temperature change. The way the wind shifted when blocked by pine branches, they returned to the cabin. And Onawa made tea from herbs she'd gathered in autumn before the snows came. The scent filled the small space, sharp and slightly bitter. What is it? Sage and yarrow.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
It helps with healing, inside and out. Autumn wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting the heat seep into her fingers. Onawa, can I ask you something? Yes, you said your village was burned. That you were 12. How did you survive after? Where did you go? Onawa settled into the chair across from her, the fire crackling between them. I walked for 3 days without direction, without food, drinking from streams. I did not know where I was going. I only knew I could not stay. On the 4th day, I collapsed near a trading post. A French trapper found me, a man named Baptiste. He was old, alone, suspicious of everyone. But he took me in. She paused, sipping her tea. He taught me to trap, to cure hides, to track game. He taught me French and English because he said a person who speaks many languages can survive anywhere. I lived with him for 4 years, until he died in his sleep one winter. This was his cabin. Did you love him? Like a grandfather. He never touched me with anything but respect. He never asked me to be anything but myself. When he died, I buried him on the ridge above this place, where he could see the mountains he loved. I keep his cabin maintained, because it would sadden me to let his work fall to ruin. Autumn understood. Some debts could only be repaid by honoring memory. After he died, what did you do? I trapped and traded. I moved between Modoc camps and white settlements, belonging fully to neither. Some called me traitor for speaking English and trading with settlers. Others called me savage for keeping my language and ways. I learned to care nothing for what others called me. I knew who I was, and who is that? Onawa smiled in the firelight. Onawa Greywolf, daughter of smoke and memory, keeper of old paths and maker of new ones. That is enough. 2 weeks passed. The snows came heavier, trapping them in the high country, which Onawa said was good. No one would try to travel these passes until spring. They were safe, isolated, forgotten by the world below. Autumn grew stronger. Her body, which had been starved and brutalized, began to fill out with regular meals of venison stew, cornmeal cakes, and dried fruit Onawa had stored. The cuts and bruises faded. Her hair, washed and braided by Onawa's patient hands, regained some of its auburn luster. But more than her body, her spirit began to heal. She learned to do small tasks. Onawa taught her to feel the difference between dried sage and dried thyme by scent and texture. She learned to knead bread dough, to judge when it was ready by how it felt under her hands. She learned to feed the fire, to feel for the hot spots on the stones of the hearth, to know by sound when water was boiling. You are learning quickly, Onawa observed one afternoon as Autumn successfully navigated from the sleeping platform to the table without her walking stick. Using only memory and touch, I'm starting to understand the space. It's like a song I'm memorizing. That is a good way to think of it. The world is larger and more complex than this cabin, but the principle is the same. Learn the song of a place, and you can move through it. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Autumn asked the question that had been growing in her mind. When spring comes and the pass is clear, what happens to me? Onawa poked at the fire with an iron rod, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. That depends on what you want. I told you before, you are free to choose. But I have no money, no family that I know of, no skills beyond what you've taught me these past weeks. How can I choose anything when I have nothing? You have more than you think. You have survived. You have learned. You have a mind that works and hands that can be trained. These are not nothing. Autumn twisted her hands in her lap. I want to find out what happened to my parents. The bandits said they died of cholera, but I don't know if that's true. Our wagon train was heading to Denver. There might be records, someone who knows what happened after the attack. Onawa nodded slowly. Then when spring comes, we will go to Denver. We will ask questions. We will find truth if truth can be found. You would do that? Travel all that way for answers that might not exist? I have nowhere else I need to be. And you deserve to know your story, all of it. Not just the parts that men like Virgil decided to tell you. Autumn felt tears threatening but held them back. I don't understand why you care. You don't know me. I'm nothing to you. Onawa reached across the space between them and took Autumn's hand. Her grip firm and warm. You are wrong. You are someone who needed help when no one else would give it. That makes you someone worth knowing. Do not mistake my choice to help for pity. I do not pity you. I respect you. The words settled into Autumn like warmth from the fire, reaching places that had been cold for so long she'd forgotten they existed. That night, as Autumn lay in her sleeping platform, now built opposite Onawa's with furs and blankets of her own, she spoke into the darkness. Onawa? Yes? Thank you. For everything. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Across the cabin, Onawa's voice came soft but clear. You are welcome, Autumn Merrick. Now sleep. Tomorrow I will teach you to identify trees by the feel of their bark. It is a useful skill. Autumn smiled in the darkness, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, the smile was real, but peace in the mountains was always temporary. 3 days later, as Onawa returned from checking her trap line, she found tracks in the snow near the clearing's edge. Boot prints, fresh, made within the last few hours. A single man, moving carefully, scouting. The tracks circled the cabin at a distance, observing, then retreated back toward the lower slopes. Onawa said nothing to Autumn that evening, but she loaded her rifle and placed it closer to hand. She had learned long ago that men who scouted in winter were men with purpose. And that purpose was rarely good. The next morning, she found more tracks. Closer this time, and beside them, the prints of a second man. They were being watched, and whoever was watching was getting bolder. That evening, as Autumn prepared for sleep, Onawa finally spoke. Autumn, I need to teach you something tomorrow. Something important. What is it? How to hide. And how to stay hidden no matter what you hear. Autumn's face went pale. They found us, didn't they? The bandits. I do not know yet who they are. But someone is watching the cabin, and I do not believe they mean us well. Tomorrow, I will show you a place in the forest, a hollow beneath a fallen tree. You will memorize the path to it, and if I tell you to go there, you will go immediately and stay until I come for you. What if you don't come? Onawa's voice was steady, betraying nothing. Then you will wait 3 days. If I have not returned by the third dawn, you will take the paint horse, follow the stream downhill until you reach the trading post at Willow Bend, and you will find a woman there named Marie Thibault. Tell her Baptist's daughter sent you. She will help. Autumn's hands trembled. I just found safety. I just started to feel like I might survive. And now this. Onawa moved across the cabin and knelt beside Autumn's platform, taking both her hands. Listen to me. You will survive because you are stronger than you know. You survived Virgil and his men. You survived being sold like property. You survived weeks of fear and pain. This is just another thing to survive, and you will. I promise you this, no one will take you while I still breathe. The certainty in her voice was absolute, carved from stone and tempered in fire. Autumn nodded, swallowing her fear. Teach me to hide. Teach me to survive. I won't be helpless anymore. You were never helpless. You were only alone. Now you are not. Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the pines like something hungry. In the darkness beyond the firelight, The tracks in the snow filled slowly with fresh powder. But the men who made them were already planning their approach, already counting the value of what they'd come to take back. Dawn came gray and muted, the sun hidden behind thick clouds that promised more snow. Onawa woke autumn before first light, her hand gentle on the girl's shoulder, but her voice urgent. Get dressed. Warm clothes, layers. We go now. Autumn dressed quickly, her fingers finding the buckskin leggings and wool shirt Onawa had given her, clothes that fit better than the tattered dress she'd arrived in. She pulled on the moccasins, now familiar friends to her feet, and reached for her walking stick. Leave it, Onawa said. Where we are going, you will need both hands free. Outside, the cold bit through even the layers of clothing. Onawa took Autumn's hand and led her away from the cabin. Not toward the clearing she knew, but in a different direction. They walked for what felt like a quarter hour, Onawa describing obstacles before they reached them, guiding Autumn over fallen logs and around clusters of rock. We are moving downslope now, Onawa said. The trees are thicker here. There is a ridge to our right. You can hear how the wind sounds different when it hits stone. Autumn listened, learning. The forest had its own language, and Onawa was teaching her to speak it. They stopped in a place where the air felt close and closed. Onawa guided Autumn's hands to rough bark, to the massive trunk of a fallen pine that had come down years ago, its roots torn from the earth and creating a hollow beneath. Feel this tree. The bark is rough, deeply ridged. If you run your hand along it, you will find a branch stub here, like a hook. That is your marker. The hollow is beneath, where the roots pulled up. You can crawl inside. There is room for you to lie flat, and the roots and earth will hide you from sight. Autumn knelt, her hands exploring the space. It smelled of damp earth and rotting wood, but it was deep, concealed. A pocket of darkness within darkness. If I tell you to come here, you will count your steps from the cabin door. 43 steps northeast, toward the sound of the ridge wind. You will find this tree, and you will hide inside until I come for you. Do you understand? Yes. Say it back to me. 43 steps from the cabin door, toward the ridge wind. Find the tree with the hook branch. Crawl into the hollow beneath the roots, wait for you. Good. Now we practice the path back. They walked it 3 times. Onawa describing landmarks Autumn could identify by touch and sound. A boulder shaped like a broken tooth. A cluster of 3 pine saplings growing so close together their trunks touched. The way the ground sloped upward in the last 10 steps before the clearing. By the time they returned to the cabin, Autumn had memorized the route. Her mind building a map made of texture and temperature and the specific voice of the wind through different trees. Inside, Onawa made a quick breakfast of cornmeal mush and dried berries. But her movements were tight, controlled. She kept glancing at the door, her rifle now propped against the wall within arm's reach. How many men did you see in the tracks? Autumn asked quietly. 2, maybe 3. The snow makes it hard to be certain. Do you think it's Virgil and his men? Onawa poured weak coffee from the pot that sat perpetually near the fire. I do not know. It could be anyone. Trappers sometimes come this high, though rarely in deep winter. Could be claim jumpers looking for the old trapper's cache, thinking this cabin might hold gold or furs worth stealing. But you don't believe that. No. Men who scout for days before approaching are men who know what they are looking for, and do not want to be seen doing it. Autumn set down her bowl, appetite gone. If they come for me, will you let them take me? To keep yourself safe? Onawa's head snapped toward her, eyes flashing. I did not bring you here to abandon you at the first sign of trouble. Whatever comes, we face it together. But I need to know you will follow my instructions without question if things become dangerous. I will, even if those instructions are to hide while I do things you cannot see. Even if you hear sounds that frighten you and want to help. Autumn's hands clenched in her lap. Yes, I trust you. The words hung in the air between them. Simple but weighted with everything they had built over these weeks of firelight and patient teaching. They came that afternoon, when the light was failing and the temperature had dropped enough to make breath visible even inside the cabin. Onawa heard them first, the slight crunch of snow under boots trying to move quietly, the whisper of fabric against branches. She moved to the door, peering through a gap in the shuttered window. 3 men, spread out, approaching from different angles. Professional, careful, one she recognized. Pike, the wiry, nervous bandit from Cripple Creek. The other 2 were strangers. Hired muscle by the look of them, wearing mismatched gear and carrying rifles like men who knew how to use them. Onawa turned from the window and crossed to Autumn in 3 long strides. They are here. 3 men. Go now. 43 steps. Do not come back until I call your name 3 times. Do you understand? 3 times. Autumn stood, her face pale but composed. I understand. Go. Autumn moved to the door, opened it, and slipped out into the dying light. She turned toward where the ridge wind sang against stone and began counting steps. 1, 2, 3. Her hands extended, feeling for the landmarks Onawa had taught her. 7, 8, 9. The cold bit at her face, but she kept moving, kept counting. 15, 16. She found the broken tooth boulder with her left hand, adjusted her angle. 23, 24. The ground began to slope downward. 31, 32. She heard the 3 saplings rattling in the wind and corrected her course slightly. 40, 41, 42, 43. Her hands found the ridged bark, traced it until she felt the hook branch. She knelt, found the hollow, and crawled inside. The earth was cold and damp, but the roots formed a roof above her and the darkness was complete. She lay still, controlling her breathing the way she had learned during those terrible weeks with the bandits. Making herself small, silent, invisible, back at the cabin. Onawa checked the load in her rifle, then set it aside and drew her knife instead. She preferred to see a man's eyes when she fought him, preferred the honesty of close combat to the distance of gunfire. She positioned herself beside the door, in the shadow where the firelight didn't reach. And waited. The knock, when it came, was almost polite. Hello in the cabin, Pike's voice called, trying to sound friendly and failing. Just some travelers looking for shelter from the cold. Saw your smoke. Onawa said nothing. We know you're in there, Modoc woman. We tracked you from Cripple Creek. Been following you for near 2 weeks now. We don't want trouble. We just want the girl. Still Onawa remained silent. Pike's voice hardened. She belongs to Virgil. He paid for her fair and square, and you stole his property. Now you can hand her over peaceful-like, or we can come in there and take her. Your choice. Onawa finally spoke, her voice carrying through the door calm and cold. She belongs to no one. She is a free person. You have no claim to her. That ain't how Virgil sees it. He says you made a fool of him in front of half the town, buying his merchandise and then disappearing into the mountains. Says it's bad for business if word gets out that people can just take what he's selling without consequences. I paid your price. The transaction was complete. Pike laughed, ugly and sharp. The transaction was you buying temporary use of the girl, not ownership. Virgil wants her back. He's got buyers down in Santa Fe, rich men who pay good money for exotic goods. A blind white girl who can't identify her owners? That's worth more than 2 bits. That's worth real gold. Onawa's grip on her knife tightened. She is not here. I sent her away 3 days ago, down to the settlements. You wasted your time. A new voice spoke, older, rougher. Now that's a lie, and we all know it. We've been watching. Saw smoke every day. Saw 2 shapes moving past the windows. Saw you both out this morning, practicing some kind of path through the trees. She's here somewhere, and we're going to find her. Then you will have to come through me first. There was a pause. then the sound of the other men conferring in low voices. Onawa used the time to move, shifting position to the opposite side of the door, putting the heavy log table between herself and the entrance. "Have it your way," Pike called out. "Boys, we're going in." The door exploded inward, not kicked but rammed with a heavy branch they'd found. It caught on the internal latch and held for a moment, then tore free. The first man through was one of the hired guns, a big man with a scarred face and a club in his hand. He expected to find Onawa near the fire, an easy target. Instead, she came from the side, her knife finding the soft flesh under his arm, where the leather vest didn't protect. He screamed and went down, blood spraying across the cabin floor. The second man, smarter, stayed in the doorway and fired his rifle. The shot went wide, punching through the wall beside the hearth. Onawa threw her knife. It wasn't a killing throw, but it didn't need to be. The blade buried itself in the man's thigh, and he collapsed, clutching at the wound. Pike, still outside, cursed and grabbed the wounded man, dragging him back from the doorway. "Crazy Modoc bitch! You just killed Harlan." "He is not dead," Onawa called back. "But he will bleed heavily unless you bind that wound. Take your men and leave. The girl is not worth dying for. The hell she ain't. Virgil's paying us $50 each to bring her back. That's more money than I've seen in 2 years." Onawa moved to the first man, the one she'd cut. He was still alive but fading fast, his blood pooling on the floor. She took his rifle and his ammunition, then dragged him to the door and shoved him outside where Pike could reach him. "Take him. Get him to a doctor if you want him to live. This is your only warning. If you come through that door again, I will not wound, I will kill." Pike grabbed the bleeding man and started binding his wound with strips torn from his own shirt. His voice when he spoke again had lost its false friendliness. "You can't stay in there forever. We'll wait. Cold will drive you out, hunger will drive you out, or we'll just burn you out. One way or another, we're getting that girl." Onawa barred what remained of the door and began preparing. She dragged the heavy table against the entrance, then stacked anything heavy on top of it. She filled every container with water from the barrel, knowing fire was a real threat. She loaded both rifles and checked her ammunition. Enough for a prolonged defense, but not infinite. Outside, hidden in the hollow beneath the fallen tree, Autumn heard the gunshot and flinched. Her hands clenched in the damp earth, every instinct screaming at her to run back, to help, to do something. But she had promised. She had promised to stay hidden until Onawa called her name 3 times. She lay in the darkness and counted her breaths, trying to stay calm. She thought about the walking stick Onawa had carved for her, about the patient hands that had taught her to navigate the cabin, about the voice that had told her she was worth more than 2 bits. She thought about survival and strength and the difference between helplessness and patience, and she waited. Night fell completely. Inside the cabin, Onawa kept the fire low, just enough to prevent freezing but not enough to silhouette her against the windows. She could hear the men outside, could smell tobacco smoke from their camp just beyond the tree line. They were settling in for a siege, confident that time was on their side. But they didn't know these mountains like she did. They didn't know about the narrow ravine behind the cabin that led down to a secondary trail. They didn't know that the cabin had a back exit, hidden beneath a pile of firewood, a tunnel that Baptist had dug for exactly this kind of situation. They thought they had her trapped. She waited until the deepest part of night, when men's attention wandered and cold made them huddle closer to their fire. Then she moved the firewood carefully, quietly, and opened the tunnel hatch. It was narrow, barely wide enough for her shoulders, and it smelled of earth and old wood. She crawled through, emerged 50 yards behind the cabin, and circled wide through the trees. The men had made their camp in a small clearing, close enough to watch the cabin, but far enough to feel safe from a sudden attack. 3 sleeping forms, wrapped in blankets. Pike sat watch, but his attention was on the cabin, not the forest behind him. Onawa moved like smoke, like memory, like all the lessons her people had taught her before the fire took them. She reached Pike's position and laid the edge of her knife against his throat before he even knew she was there. "Make a sound and it will be your last," she whispered. Pike froze, every muscle locked. "You are going to wake your friends very carefully. You are going to tell them that continuing this hunt is death. You are going to take your wounded man and leave these mountains. If I ever see any of you again, I will not give warnings. I will not wound. Do you understand?" Pike nodded fractionally, the knife edge pressing against his skin. "Good, now move." He woke the others, his voice shaking. Onawa stood in the shadows, her knife visible, her rifle pointed at the group. The wounded men could barely stand, needing support from their companions. They gathered their gear with fumbling hands and started down the mountain, leaving most of their supplies behind in their haste. Onawa watched until they disappeared into the trees, then waited another hour to be certain they weren't circling back. Only when she was absolutely sure did she return to the cabin, seal the tunnel entrance, and step outside the front door. She called into the darkness, her voice carrying across the snow. "Autumn, autumn, autumn," 3 times as promised. In the hollow beneath the fallen tree, Autumn heard her name and began to cry, relief flooding through her so powerfully she shook. She crawled out of the hiding place, stood on trembling legs, and began counting her steps back. 43 steps, but backward this time. Following the map in her mind, she found Onawa standing in the clearing. And without thinking, without hesitation, she walked straight into the other woman's arms. Onawa held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring words in Modoc that Autumn didn't understand but felt in her bones. "You did well," Onawa finally said in English. "You were brave. You trusted. You survived." I heard the gunshot. "I thought they'd killed you. They tried. I was less cooperative than they expected." They went inside together. The cabin showed signs of the brief fight. Blood on the floor, the door broken, but intact enough to bar. Onawa cleaned up while Autumn sat by the fire, still shaking. "They will tell Virgil they failed," Onawa said as she worked. "He will be angry. He may try again when spring comes and the pass is clear. Then what do we do?" Onawa looked at her, firelight catching in her dark eyes. "We do not run. We do not hide. When spring comes, we go to Denver as planned, and we find the truth about your past. And if Virgil or his men come for you again, we make sure they understand that some people cannot be bought, cannot be sold, and cannot be intimidated into silence." Autumn nodded slowly. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." "Then we will teach you not to be. Fear is useful when it keeps you alive, but it becomes a cage when it keeps you from living. You have been in enough cages." That night, as the fire burned low and the broken door was secured as well as they could manage, Autumn lay in her sleeping platform and spoke into the darkness. "Onawa?" "Yes?" "When you held that knife to Pike's throat, were you afraid?" A long pause then. "Yes, fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. But I have learned to use fear instead of letting it use me. That is the difference between a victim and a survivor. Teach me that. Teach me to use fear. I will. But first, sleep. Tomorrow we repair the door and prepare for winter's deeper cold. The hard work of survival continues. And you will need your strength." Autumn closed her eyes. And despite everything, she slept. Winter deepened its grip on the mountains. And with it came a transformation neither woman expected. The attack had changed something fundamental between them, shifted their relationship from rescuer and rescued to something closer to equals bound by mutual survival. Onawa began teaching Autumn skills that went beyond navigation. On the 3rd morning after the attack, she placed a skinning knife in Autumn's hands. "Feel the weight. The balance. The blade is sharp enough to split a hair, so respect it. Today you learn to prepare meat," She guided Autumn's hands to a rabbit carcass she'd trapped that morning, already cleaned and ready for butchering. Autumn recoiled at first, the texture unfamiliar and unsettling. "I can't see what I'm doing." "I'll ruin it. Your hands see better than most people's eyes if you trust them."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story.
Feel here, where the joint connects. The knife goes between the bones, not through them. Let the blade find the path. For an hour, Onawa guided Autumn's hands with patient instruction, teaching her to read the geography of flesh and bone through touch alone. By the end, Autumn had successfully separated the rabbit into portions, her hands bloody but her face flushed with accomplishment. "You did well. Tomorrow we do this again, and the next day, until your hands know the work without thought." The lessons expanded. Onawa taught Autumn to identify different types of wood by smell and texture, because knowing fuel quality meant the difference between a fire that lasted the night and one that died in darkness. She taught her to card wool from the sheep pelts Baptist had stored in the cabin loft, to spin it into rough thread using a drop spindle, to judge the thread's strength by how it felt between her fingers. "Why are you teaching me all this?" Autumn asked one evening as they worked side by side, Onawa mending a torn blanket while Autumn practiced her spinning. "Because winter in the mountains does not forgive helplessness. Because if something happens to me, you need to survive alone until spring. Because skills are freedom, and you have been without freedom long enough, but it was more than survival skills." One night, when the wind howled so fiercely that snow forced itself through cracks in the walls, Onawa began to teach Autumn her language. In Modoc we have a word, Maklex. It means the people. But it also means those who are worthy of being called human, not because of what they own or what they can see, but because of how they face the world. She spoke words slowly, having Autumn repeat them. Words for snow and fire, for courage and fear, for the specific kind of silence that comes before dawn. Autumn absorbed them hungrily, each new word a small rebellion against the men who had tried to reduce her to property without language or worth. 3 weeks after the attack, a storm came that buried the cabin to the windowsills. For 4 days they were trapped inside, burning through their wood supply, rationing food, listening to the wind scream like something alive and furious. On the 3rd night, when the cold had seeped through every crack and their breath frosted in the air despite the fire, Autumn began to speak. My mother's name was Catherine. She had red hair like mine, and she sang while she worked. My father was James, a surveyor for the railroad company. He had gentle hands and he read to me every night after my sight started failing. Onawa added another log to the fire, listening. I wasn't born blind. It started when I was 14. Headaches first, then my vision would blur at the edges. The doctor in Kansas City said it was pressure building behind my eyes. Something in my skull that was growing where it shouldn't. He said there was a surgeon in Denver, a man trained in Europe who might be able to help. Her voice caught, but she continued. My parents sold everything. Our house, my mother's wedding ring, my father's surveying equipment. They bought passage on a wagon train heading west. We were 3 days from Denver when the bandits came. You do not have to speak of this, Onawa said quietly. No, I want to. I need to. They came at dawn, like you said. 5 men on horseback, faces covered with bandanas. They shot the wagon master first, then his son who tried to fight back. The other families scattered, some fought, some ran. My parents hid me under blankets in our wagon, told me to stay silent no matter what I heard. Autumn's hands twisted in her lap, reliving it. I heard my father shouting, heard my mother screaming. Then gunshots. Then silence. I stayed hidden like they told me, stayed silent even when the bandits searched the wagon. But they found me anyway. Virgil pulled me out by my hair, looked at my eyes, and laughed. Said I was worthless but might fetch something from the right buyer. What happened to your parents' bodies? I don't know. The bandits wouldn't tell me. They just kept moving, kept me tied up, kept threatening me. After the first week, I stopped asking. After the second week, I stopped hoping anyone would come. Onawa reached across the space between them and took Autumn's hand. When spring comes and we go to Denver, we will find out what happened. If there are graves, you will know where they rest. If there are no graves, we will make sure they are remembered properly. This I promise you. The storm broke on the 5th day, leaving the world transformed under 6 feet of fresh snow. Onawa spent hours digging out the door, creating a path to the lean-to where the paint horse had weathered the storm with stoic patience. When she finally reached the animal, she found it thin but alive. And she spent the rest of the day bringing it extra feed and checking it for frostbite. That evening, as they ate a sparse meal of the last of their dried venison and some wild onions Onawa had stored, she made an announcement. Tomorrow we go hunting. Real hunting, not checking trap lines. The storm will have driven elk down from the high peaks into the valleys. We need meat to last until spring, and I need to teach you how to be still in the presence of prey. I can't hunt. I can't see to aim. You will not be aiming. You will be listening, feeling, learning to read the forest the way prey animals do. Hunting is not just about the kill. It is about understanding the patterns of life around you. They left before dawn, Onawa leading the way and Autumn following. One hand on Onawa's shoulder, learning to match her stride, to step where she stepped. They moved through the snow-heavy forest for over an hour before Onawa stopped and guided Autumn down into a crouch behind a fallen log. Be still. Barely breathe. There's a game trail 30 paces ahead. The elk use it to move between feeding grounds. We wait. They waited for what felt like hours. Autumn's legs cramped. Her body screamed to move, but Onawa's hand on her shoulder kept her anchored. And slowly, gradually, Autumn began to hear what Onawa heard. The specific rhythm of hoofbeats in snow. The sound of something large moving through brush. The grunt of communication between animals. 3 elk, Onawa whispered. 2 cows and a yearling. The yearling is male, his first winter. He will be tender. Autumn heard Onawa raise the rifle, heard the controlled breath, the slight creak of the trigger. Then the shot, impossibly loud in the frozen air, echoing off the mountains. The sound of the herd scattering, crashing through undergrowth. Then silence. Come, I need your help. Onawa led Autumn to where the yearling had fallen, a clean shot through the heart. She placed Autumn's hands on the animal's still warm body. Feel this. This is what sustains us. This animal gave its life so we can survive the winter. We honor it by using everything, wasting nothing, for the next 2 hours. Onawa taught Autumn the sacred work of field dressing. She guided her hands through the process, explaining each step, each cut, each organ, and what it could be used for. The heart and liver for immediate eating. The hide for leather. The sinew for thread. The bones for tools and broth. The antler velvet for medicine. By the time they dragged the butchered elk back to the cabin on a travois Onawa had constructed from pine branches, Autumn was exhausted, covered in blood, and strangely exhilarated. She had participated in the oldest human transaction, the exchange of death for life, and it had changed something in her that night. As they roasted elk heart over the fire and Autumn tasted the rich, iron-strong meat, Onawa spoke. You asked me once why I care about you. I will tell you now. When I saw you on that platform in Cripple Creek, I saw myself. Not because we share the same suffering, but because we both survived men who wanted us to be less than human. You with your blindness, me with my heritage. Both of us reduced to things instead of people. She paused, choosing her words, but I also saw something else. I saw someone who had not given up, even when giving up would have been easier. You stood on that platform with your head up, not begging, not broken. That takes a strength most people never find. I saw that strength, and I wanted to help it grow. Autumn was quiet for a long moment. I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was barely holding on. That is exactly what strength is. Not the absence of fear or pain, but the choice to hold on despite both. You have that. You have always had it. Later that night, unable to sleep, Autumn asked the question that had been building in her mind for weeks. What happens between us when spring comes? When we go to Denver and find out about my parents? What happens after? Onawa was quiet, feeding small sticks to the fire. That depends on what you want. If you want to build a life in Denver, find work, make a home among people, I will help you do that. If you want to return to the mountains, to live a life closer to what we have here, you would be welcome to stay. And if I don't know what I want, then you take time to discover it. There is no urgency in choosing. The world will not end if you spend another season learning what makes you whole. Autumn lay in her sleeping platform, thinking about wholeness, about what it meant to be a person instead of a burden, about the difference between being saved and being seen. The weeks that followed settled into a pattern of work and learning. Onawa taught Autumn to distinguish between the calls of different birds, because birds announce danger before humans could sense it. She taught her to read weather by the feel of the air, the smell of incoming snow, the specific pressure that preceded a storm. She taught her to fight with a knife, not by sight but by sound and proximity, by feeling the displacement of air when someone moved close. You think because you cannot see an attacker that you are helpless, Onawa said during one lesson, circling Autumn in the cabin while the girl held a practice knife made of wood. But an attacker makes sounds, breathing, footsteps, fabric moving. Listen. She moved closer, and Autumn's head snapped toward the sound. Her arm came up, the wooden knife positioned between them. Good. Again, they practiced until Autumn could track Onawa's movement around the cabin with increasing accuracy. Until she could defend herself against a slow attack. Until the wooden knife felt like an extension of her arm instead of a foreign object. One evening in late February, as the days began to lengthen and the sun's angle promised the eventual return of spring, Onawa pulled out a map. She spread it on the table and took Autumn's hands, guiding them over the paper. This is where we are. She placed Autumn's finger on one spot. These are mountains. Feel how the map has ridges? This is the pass we will take to reach the lower country. And here, 3 days' ride, is Denver. Autumn's fingers traced the route. When do we leave? When the pass clears. Another month, maybe less. I will ride down to Willow Bend in 2 weeks to get news to see if the trails are opening. While I am gone, you will stay here and continue practicing everything I have taught you. Alone? You are ready. You know the cabin. You know how to maintain the fire. You know where the emergency supplies are hidden. I will be gone 3 days, 4 at most. Autumn felt fear rise in her throat but pushed it down. What if something happens? What if Virgil's men come back? Then you go to the hiding place and you stay there until you hear me call your name 3 times. If I do not return in 4 days, you take the paint horse and you ride downslope until you find the trading post. Marie Thibault will help you. But I will return, Autumn. I have survived worse than a trip to a trading post. The night before Onawa left, they sat together by the fire. And Autumn finally asked the question she had been holding for weeks. What if I find out my parents are dead? What if there's nothing waiting for me in Denver except graves? Onawa considered this carefully. Then you will grieve them properly, with knowledge instead of uncertainty. Then you will decide who you want to be now, without the weight of not knowing. Grief is heavy, but uncertainty is heavier. I'm afraid of what comes after. Afraid of being alone again. Onawa took her hand. You are not alone. Even if I am not physically beside you, you carry everything I have taught you. You carry your own strength, your own courage. That is not something that can be taken from you. Autumn nodded, not entirely convinced but willing to believe. Onawa left at dawn, riding the paint horse down the mountain with promises to return quickly. Autumn stood in the clearing and listened to the sound of hoofbeats fading into distance, then turned and went back inside the cabin. For the first time since Cripple Creek, she was truly alone. But as she moved through the familiar space, feeding the fire, preparing a simple meal, she realized something had changed. The solitude did not feel like abandonment. It felt like trust. Onawa trusted her to survive, to be capable, to be strong. And slowly, carefully, Autumn was beginning to trust herself. On the third day, she heard riders approaching. Multiple horses, moving quickly. Her heart hammered as she grabbed the rifle Onawa had left, made sure it was loaded, and moved to the door. She barred it from inside, then waited, listening. The horses stopped outside. Boots on snow. Low voices conferring. Then a knock, hard and demanding. Open up. We know you're in there. It was not Onawa's voice. It was not Pike's voice. It was someone new, someone worse. And Autumn realized that the true test of everything she had learned was about to begin. Autumn stood frozen behind the barred door, the rifle heavy in her hands. Her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. The voice outside came again, harder this time. I said, open up. We've been riding for 3 days straight, and we're not in the mood for games. It was a woman's voice, rough with exhaustion and cold, carrying an accent Autumn couldn't place. Not Pike, not Virgil's men. Something else entirely. Who are you? Autumn called back, keeping her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. A pause, then the sound of conferring in low voices. Multiple people. At least 3. Then the woman spoke again. My name is Delphine Marchant. I'm a federal investigator out of Santa Fe. I'm looking for a Modoc. Woman named Onawa Greywolf and a girl named Autumn Merrick. If you're her, we need to talk, federal investigator. The words sent ice through Autumn's veins. What did the government want with them? Had buying her been illegal? Was Onawa in trouble? Onawa isn't here, Autumn said carefully. And I don't know anyone named Autumn Merrick. She heard a sigh of frustration from outside. Listen, we know you're in there, and we know who you are. We tracked Onawa from Cripple Creek, followed the same trail that Bandit Pike took. We found him and his men 2 days ago, camped at Willow Bend, nursing their wounds. They told us everything about the attack on this cabin, about the blind girl the Modoc woman bought. That's you. Autumn's mind raced. Why would federal investigators care about what happened in Cripple Creek? Why follow them all this way? I'm not opening this door until you tell me what you want, she said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. Another pause. Then a different voice, male, younger. Miss Merrick, we're not here to hurt you or arrest anyone. We're here because your father worked for the Denver and Rio Grande Railway. He was investigating land fraud and corruption when he was killed. We believe the attack on your wagon train wasn't random. We believe your father was murdered to silence him. The world seemed to tilt. Autumn gripped the rifle tighter, using it to steady herself. My father died in a bandit attack. That's what everyone said. That's what everyone was meant to think, the young man continued. But we've been building a case for 8 months. Your father had evidence, documents proving that railroad executives were forging land deeds, displacing native families, and murdering anyone who discovered the fraud. We think he hid those documents somewhere, and we need your help to find them. Autumn's legs felt weak. She leaned against the wall, trying to process this. Even if that's true, I can't help you. I'm blind. I can't read documents or identify evidence. You've wasted your time coming here. Delphine's voice came again, softer now. Miss Merrick, your father sent a letter to our office 2 days before he was killed. In it, he said he'd given certain documents to his daughter for safekeeping, that she'd hidden them somewhere only she would think to look. He said even if something happened to him, you would remember where they were. Autumn's breath caught. She did remember. The night before the attack, her father had been agitated, pacing their wagon. He'd come to her bedside late, pressed a leather envelope into her hands, and whispered urgently. The memory came flooding back with crystalline clarity. "Keep this safe, Autumn. Hide it where you used to hide your childhood treasures, in the place only you and your mother knew about. If anything happens to me, these papers will tell the truth." She had hidden the envelope that very night, tucked it into the hiding place she'd used as a child, a place she could find by touch alone. But the wagon had been destroyed in the attack, scattered across the mountain pass. The documents were likely gone, burned or buried or carried off by scavengers. "The documents are gone," Autumn said hollowly. "The wagons were destroyed. Everything was lost." "Not everything," the young man said. "We found the wreckage of your family's wagon 3 weeks ago. Most of it was picked clean, but the frame is still there. If you can show us where you hid the documents, there's a chance they survived. Leather is resilient, and if the hiding place was protected from the elements." He left the sentence unfinished, letting hope fill the silence. Autumn stood in the darkness behind her eyes, weighing trust against fear, possibility against risk. These people could be exactly who they claimed. They could also be working for the same men who'd killed her father, trying to eliminate the last piece of evidence. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she asked. "You don't," Delphine said bluntly. "You have to make a choice based on incomplete information, same as we did when we decided to track you across half of Colorado in winter. But I can tell you this. We found Pike and his men because they got drunk and started bragging about the blind girl they'd sold and the Modoc woman who'd scarred them up. When we questioned them, they also mentioned that Virgil Cass has connections to a man named Silas Drummond." The name meant nothing to Autumn. "Drummond is a land agent for the railroad," Delphine continued. "He's the one who's been orchestrating the fraud, the forgeries, and we suspect the murders. If we can prove it, we can bring down a network of corruption that's displaced over 40 native families and killed at least 7 people that we know of. Your father was trying to stop this. His death should mean something." Autumn felt tears burning in her sightless eyes. Her father, the gentle man who'd read to her every night, who'd sold everything to try to save her vision, had been murdered not by random bandits, but by men who valued land and gold over human life. She made her decision. "If I help you, you have to promise me something," she said. "Name it," Delphine replied. "When Onawa comes back, you don't arrest her. You don't question her involvement in any of this. She saved my life. Whatever happened in Cripple Creek was legal and just, and I won't have her punished for showing me mercy." Agreed. "She's not our concern. You have my word." Autumn took a deep breath, then unbarred the door and opened it. Cold air rushed in, and with it, the sound of 3 people stamping snow from their boots. She stepped back, the rifle still in her hands, pointed at the floor but ready. "I'm Delphine Marchant," the woman's voice came from directly in front of her. "This is my associate, Thomas Chun, and our guide, Samuel Littlefoot. We mean you no harm, Miss Merrick. You can lower the rifle." Autumn lowered it slowly, setting it aside. She heard them enter, heard the door close, heard the scrape of boots on the wooden floor. "You've been living here alone?" Delphine asked, her voice carrying a note of surprise. "For 3 days. Onawa went to Willow Bend for supplies. She'll be back tomorrow. The Modoc woman taught you to manage this place by yourself? In winter, while blind?" Autumn lifted her chin. "She taught me to survive. There's a difference between being blind and being helpless." She heard what might have been a smile in Delphine's voice when she replied, "I can see that. Can you make coffee? We've been riding in the cold for hours, and I'd kill for something hot." Autumn moved through the cabin with the confidence Onawa had taught her. Finding the coffee pot, measuring grounds by feel, adding water from the barrel. She built up the fire, set the pot to boil, and brought out tin cups, all while the 3 visitors watched in silence. Remarkable, Thomas Chun finally said. How long have you been blind? My sight failed over the course of a year. It's been completely gone for about 8 months now. And you remember where you hid your father's documents? Autumn nodded, pouring coffee when it was ready. I hid them in my mother's sewing box, in a false bottom my father made for her. She kept it in our wagon, always in the same place. If the box survived the attack, the documents should still be there. Can you describe the location of the wagon wreckage? Delphine asked. No, but I can take you there. I remember the route we were traveling, the landmarks my father described. If you get me close to the pass where we were attacked, I can guide you the rest of the way. The 3 investigators exchanged glances. Though Autumn couldn't see them, that's a 4-day ride from here. Maybe 5 in this snow, Samuel Littlefoot said, his voice carrying the distinctive cadence of someone who spoke English as a second language. And the pass is dangerous this time of year. Avalanche risk, exposure, limited shelter. I've survived worse, Autumn said simply. And my father deserves justice. When do we leave? The question hung in the air until Delphine answered. We wait for your Modoc friend to return. We don't split up in this country, and we don't leave people behind wondering what happened. We leave tomorrow afternoon, all together, or not at all. Onawa returned the next morning, riding hard, the paint horse lathered despite the cold. She pulled up short when she saw 3 unfamiliar horses tied to the lean-to, her hand moving immediately to the rifle across her saddle. Autumn heard the hoofbeats and rushed outside. Onawa. It's all right, they're federal investigators. They're here about my father. Onawa dismounted cautiously, her eyes never leaving the cabin door where Delphine, Thomas and Samuel had emerged. She positioned herself between them and Autumn instinctively. You let strangers into our home while I was gone? She asked, her voice tight. They have information about my father's death. About why he was really killed. Onawa, he was murdered. It wasn't random bandits, it was planned. And I can help prove it. Delphine stepped forward, hands visible and empty. Miss Grey Wolf, we're not here to cause trouble. We need Autumn's help to recover evidence that could bring down a corrupt land agent, responsible for multiple murders and the displacement of your people. We'd like you to accompany us, as her guardian and protector. Onawa's eyes narrowed. My people. You know what was done to the Modoc? Samuel Littlefoot spoke, his voice gentle. I am Cheyenne. My family was forced onto a reservation in Oklahoma. I work with these investigators because they are trying to stop the men who profit from our suffering. Not all white people are the enemy, though many are. These 2 I trust with my life. Onawa studied him for a long moment, then looked at Autumn. You want to do this? Travel to the place where your parents died, dig through wreckage, face the memories? Autumn nodded. I want the truth. I want justice. And I want my father's death to mean something. Onawa exhaled slowly, her breath misting in the cold air. Then we ride together. But if this is a trap, if any harm comes to her, federal investigators or not, you will answer to me. They left 2 hours later, 5 riders moving in a tight group through the snow-heavy mountains. Autumn rode behind Onawa on the paint horse, her arms wrapped around the other woman's waist, listening to the rhythm of travel. Delphine led, following Samuel's guidance through passes and trails that would take them east toward the Sangre de Cristo range, where the attack had occurred. They rode for 3 days, camping in sheltered valleys, taking turns on watch. Onawa remained wary of the investigators, but Thomas Chun won her over slightly by speaking to her and halting Modoc, explaining that he'd learned some of the language from traders in California. Samuel shared stories of his own people's struggles, creating a bridge of shared pain and survival. On the 4th day, they reached the pass. Autumn felt the air change, felt the specific quality of wind that funneled through narrow mountain corridors. Memories flooded back, unwanted but undeniable. This is it, she whispered. This is where it happened. They found the wreckage scattered across half a mile of rocky slope, pieces of wagons broken and weathered, personal belongings long since carried off by scavengers or buried under snow. Delphine and Thomas began searching methodically while Samuel kept watch, and Onawa stayed close to Autumn. "Can you guide us to your family's wagon?" Delphine called. Autumn dismounted, her legs shaky. This was harder than she'd expected, standing in the place where her parents had died, where her life had shattered. But Onawa's hand found hers, steady and warm. "You do not have to do this alone," she murmured. Together, they moved through the wreckage. Autumn used her walking stick and her memories, counting paces from landmarks she remembered. The large boulder shaped like a fist. The twisted juniper that had survived the fires. The place where the trail narrowed. "Here," she said finally. "Our wagon was here." They searched for an hour before Thomas shouted, "I found something!" A metal box, badly burned but intact. Autumn's hands shook as they placed her mother's sewing box in her lap. The metal was warped from heat. The decorative painting her mother had loved was gone. But when Autumn's fingers found the hidden latch and pressed it, the false bottom opened, inside. Wrapped in oilcloth that had protected them from moisture were her father's documents. Land deeds with forged signatures. Letters detailing bribes and threats. A ledger showing payments made to men who'd carried out violence against native families. And at the bottom, a list of names, people who'd been murdered to protect the scheme. James Merrick's name was on that list, along with a notation that read, "Eliminated. Wagon attack, Sangre de Cristo Pass, March 1874. Autumn traced her father's name with trembling fingers while Delphine read the documents aloud. Each word was a nail in the coffin of the men who'd profited from death and displacement. "This is it," Delphine breathed. "This is everything we need. Miss Merrick, your father gave us the key to bringing down Silas Drummond and everyone working with him." Autumn couldn't speak. She held the papers that her father had died protecting, the evidence he'd trusted her to keep safe. She had failed him by losing them in the attack. But somehow, impossibly, they'd survived that night. They camped in a protected hollow, and Onawa built a fire while the investigators studied the documents. Autumn sat apart, wrapped in blankets, processing everything. Her father had been a hero, not just a victim. He'd stood against corruption, knowing it might cost him everything. And it had. Onawa came to sit beside her, pressing a cup of hot tea into her hands. "You did well today," she said quietly. "I found the proof that my father was murdered. I don't know if that's something to feel good about. It is proof that his death meant something. That he fought for what was right. That is worth knowing." Autumn leaned against Onawa's shoulder, exhausted and grieving, and somehow also lighter than she'd been in months. "What happens now?" she asked. "We ride to Denver. The investigators present their case. The corrupt men face justice. And you decide what kind of life you want to build from the ashes of what was taken from you." They reached Denver 6 days later, as spring was beginning to touch the lower elevations, melting snow and bringing the first green shoots to sheltered valleys. The city was larger and louder than anything Autumn had experienced since going blind, overwhelming in its chaos of sound and smell. The trial took 3 weeks. Autumn testified, her words carrying the weight of truth and loss. She told the court about her father's dedication to justice, about the documents he'd entrusted to her, about the attack that had taken her parents and left her to be sold like property. Delphine presented the evidence, and Thomas traced the web of corruption that connected Silas Drummond to land fraud, bribery, and murder. Drummond and 4 of his associates were convicted. The railroad was forced to return stolen lands to the families they'd displaced. And James Merrick's name was cleared, recognized not as a victim of random violence, but as a man who died fighting corruption. On the day the verdict was read, Autumn stood outside the courthouse with Onawa beside her. Spring sun warmed her face, and for the first time since her father's death, she felt something like peace. "What will you do now?" Onawa asked. Autumn turned toward her voice, the voice that had become home, safety, strength. I thought I might return to the mountains. If you'll have me. I'm not ready for cities and crowds. I want the quiet, the snow, the sound of wind through pines. I want to keep learning the things you teach me. Onawa took her hand. The cabin is yours as much as mine. And there is always more to learn. They left Denver the next morning. 2 women riding into the mountains as spring climbed slowly toward the high country. Behind them, justice had been served and debts had been paid. Ahead lay summer in the high peaks, autumn's colors. Another winter of firelight and survival. Autumn rode behind Onawa, her arms around the other woman's waist. Her face turned toward the sun she couldn't see, but could feel warming her skin. She had been bought for 2 bits by men who saw her as worthless. She had been saved by a woman who saw her as priceless. And somewhere between those 2 moments, she had learned the most important truth of all. Her worth had never been determined by what others saw when they looked at her. It had always been there, waiting for her to recognize it herself. As they climbed higher, leaving the settlements behind, Onawa began to sing softly in Modoc. A song about journeys and homecomings, about survival and strength. About 2 souls who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. And Autumn, who had once been sold for less than the cost of a meal, who had been reduced to property and abandoned to cruelty, listened to that song and smiled. Because she was finally, truly, free. Spring 1877. The mountain meadow bloomed with wildflowers that Autumn would never see but knew intimately by scent and texture. Lupin, she had learned, felt velvet soft and smelled faintly of pepper. Indian paintbrush had sticky leaves that clung to fingers. Columbine had delicate petals that bruised easily and a fragrance like honey mixed with rain. She knelt in the garden she and Onawa had built over 3 growing seasons, her hands moving with practiced confidence through the soil. The earth here was rich, amended with 3 years of compost and ash from their fires. Her fingers found the emerging shoots of carrots by their feathery tops, distinguished them from the weeds that tried to crowd them out. The work was meditative, grounding, a daily reminder that she could nurture life from the same earth that had once felt like her grave. You are going to pull up half the garden if you keep working through midday heat. Onawa's voice came from the direction of the cabin, carrying affection and gentle mockery in equal measure. Autumn sat back on her heels, wiping dirt from her hands onto the canvas apron she wore. Sweat dampened her collar despite the mountain air's coolness. The weeds don't care what time it is. They'll choke out everything we planted if I don't stay ahead of them. She heard Onawa's footsteps approaching. The familiar rhythm that no longer made her startle. Felt the shift in air and sunlight as the other woman's shadow fell across her. A cup pressed into her hands, cool water with mint leaves floating in it. Rest, drink. The weeds will still be there in an hour. And you will be less likely to collapse from heat. Autumn drank gratefully, the mint sharp and refreshing on her tongue. 3 years in the mountains had transformed her from the frightened girl sold for 2 bits into someone she barely recognized from her own memories. Her body had grown strong from the daily work of mountain living, hauling water, chopping wood, tending animals, working the garden. Her hands, once soft and uncertain, were now calloused and capable, able to distinguish between dozens of plant varieties by touch alone. The changes went deeper than physical. She moved through the world with confidence built from competence rather than sight. The walking stick Onawa had carved for her had been replaced twice, each new version refined based on what she learned she needed. She could navigate not just the cabin, but the entire clearing. The garden, the goat pen, the woodshed, all without hesitation. There is news from the valley, Onawa said, settling onto the ground beside Autumn. Samuel Littlefoot arrived this morning while you were working. He brought letters from Delphine and Thomas, updates on the trials. But he also brought something else. A request. Autumn turned her face toward Onawa's voice, reading the hesitation in her tone. What kind of request? There is a girl, 13 years old, Arapaho, orphaned when her family was killed in a raid on their settlement. She was taken by the men who murdered her parents, kept for 8 months, used badly. The territorial marshal recovered her 2 weeks ago when they arrested the men, but she has not spoken since. She will not eat unless forced, will not sleep without screaming. The doctor in Boulder says there is nothing physically wrong with her, but she is dying anyway. Autumn's chest tightened with recognition and rage. She knew that kind of dying, the kind that happened when the spirit gave up, even though the body still breathed. And Samuel thinks we can help her? He thinks you can. He told the marshal about you, about what you survived, about how you healed. The girl's name is Naya. She is blind in one eye from a beating, and she trusts no one. Samuel believes that if anyone can reach her, it is someone who understands what it means to survive men who see you as less than human. Autumn was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently pulling at the grass beside her. The request stirred memories she usually kept locked away, brought back the feeling of being tied on that platform in Cripple Creek, of being reduced to property worth less than a bottle of whiskey. When would she come? Only if you agree. Samuel would bring her within the week. She would stay as long as she needs. But Autumn, this is not a small thing I am asking. This would change our lives, our peace. You have every right to say no. Autumn thought about the cabin that had become her sanctuary, about the rhythms they had built over 3 years of shared survival. She thought about the quiet mornings and the long evenings by the fire, about the life they had created that asked nothing of them except that they continue living it. Then she thought about being 13 years old and broken, about having no hope and no future, about what it would have meant if someone had offered her a place to heal before the worst had happened. Tell Samuel to bring her, Autumn said quietly. Tell him we will help. She felt Onawa's hand cover hers, squeezing gently. You are certain? This will not be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. You taught me that. Naya arrived 6 days later, a silent shadow of a girl who flinched at every sound and shrank from every offered hand. Samuel carried her the last mile because she refused to walk, her body rigid with terror and defiance. He brought her into the cabin and set her gently on the chair near the hearth, where she curled into herself like something dying. Autumn heard the girl's rapid, shallow breathing, heard the small whimpers she tried to suppress. She remembered making those same sounds, remembered the terror of not knowing if the next hand would feed or strike. She approached slowly, announcing her presence with footsteps deliberate enough to be heard. She stopped 3 feet away and knelt so they would be at the same height. My name is Autumn. I cannot see you, but I can hear you breathing like you have been running for a very long time. I know you are afraid. I know you do not trust me or anyone. I know you think you will never be safe again. The girl's breathing hitched, but she made no other sound. I was like you once. Different circumstances, different cruelty, but the same fear. The same certainty that I was broken beyond repair. I want to tell you something true, something no one may have told you yet. You are not broken. You are injured, and there is a difference. Still no response, but Autumn sensed the girl was listening. Broken things cannot be fixed, but injured things can heal, given time and care and safety. This place is safe. The woman who lives here with me, Onawa, she saved my life by giving me space to heal without demands or expectations. We offer you the same. You do not have to speak. You do not have to trust us. You do not have to be anything except alive. That is enough. She stood slowly and backed away, giving the girl space. Over the following weeks, Naya remained silent and withdrawn, but small changes began to emerge. She stopped flinching quite so violently when Onawa moved near her. She began eating without being coerced, small amounts at first, then gradually more. She watched Autumn navigate the cabin with the careful attention of someone trying to understand how survival was possible. One morning, nearly a month after her arrival, Autumn was working in the garden when she heard footsteps approaching. Not Onawa's confident stride, but something hesitant, uncertain. She continued pulling weeds, not acknowledging the presence, giving whoever it was the choice to engage or retreat. How do you do that? Naya's voice was rough from disuse, barely more than a whisper. Autumn sat back, wiping her hands. Do what? Know where things are. Move without seeing. Not be afraid of the dark. Autumn considered her answer carefully. I learned. Someone patient taught me, showed me that not seeing does not mean not knowing. I use my hands, my ears, my memory. I build maps in my mind of the spaces I move through. And as for the dark, I live in it always, so I had to make peace with it or die afraid. She heard Naya move closer, settling onto the ground nearby. I can only see from one eye now. Everything looks wrong, flat. I cannot tell how far away things are. I trip on things I should be able to avoid. That will improve. Your mind will adjust. Learn to judge distance with one eye the way it used to use two. It takes time, but it will happen. How long did it take you? To stop being afraid? Autumn smiled sadly. I am still afraid sometimes. Fear does not go away completely. But I learned to use it instead of letting it use me. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you careful. But it should not keep you from living. They worked in silence for a while, Autumn returning to her weeding while Naya simply sat, watching and thinking. The men who hurt you, Naya said eventually. Did they face justice? Some of them. Not all. The world is not always fair about punishing cruelty. But the important thing is that they do not have power over me anymore. I took that power back by refusing to let what they did define who I became. How? How do you take power back? Autumn pulled up a stubborn weed, shook the soil from its roots. By surviving. By learning skills that make you capable. By building a life that is yours, not the one they tried to force on you. By waking up each day and choosing to continue, even when continuing feels impossible. Over the following months, Naya began to emerge from her shell of trauma. She learned to navigate the cabin the way Autumn had, through counting steps and memorizing landmarks. She learned to garden, to tend the goats Onawa had acquired the previous spring, to split kindling and maintain the fire. Her body grew stronger, her eye adjusted to its new limitations. And slowly, carefully, she began to smile again. One evening in late summer, as the three of them sat around the fire, Naya asked the question Autumn had been waiting for. What happens to me when winter comes? Do I have to leave? Onawa and Autumn exchanged glances, a silent conversation built on 3 years of shared understanding. You stay as long as you need, Autumn said. This winter, next winter, however many it takes until you feel ready to face the world on your own terms. You are not a burden or a guest. You are family, if you choose to be. Naya's good eye filled with tears. I thought family was something I would never have again. Family is not always blood, Onawa said quietly. Sometimes it is the people who choose to stand beside you when standing alone would be easier. Sometimes it is built from survival and shared meals, and the understanding that you are not alone in your pain. That winter was harder with 3 mouths to feed instead of 2, but it was also richer. The cabin filled with sounds it had never held before. Naya's laughter when Autumn told stories about her early days learning to navigate while blind. Samuel's deep voice when he visited monthly, bringing news and teaching Naya songs from her people. Onawa's patient instruction as she taught both younger women the skills her own mother had taught her. Spring came again. The 4th spring since autumn had been bought for 2 bits in Cripple Creek. The meadow bloomed with returning wildflowers, and with it came another visitor. Delphine Marchant arrived on horseback, older and grayer than Autumn remembered, but still carrying the same determined energy. I have a proposition, she said over coffee that evening. The territorial government is establishing a program for displaced and orphaned children. particularly those from native families and those who have suffered violence. They need people who understand trauma, who can create safe places for healing. They want to fund a network of homes like this one. Staffed by people like you, Autumn listened carefully, hearing both the opportunity and the weight of responsibility in Delphine's words. You want us to take in more children? I want you to consider it. Not just taking them in, but teaching others how to do what you have done. Creating a model that can be replicated. You have proven that healing is possible, that survival is not the end of the story, but the beginning. There are dozens of children who need what you have built here. Onawa's voice was cautious. We are not trained teachers or doctors. We are simply people who survived and learned to help others survive. That is exactly what makes you qualified, Delphine countered. These children do not need experts with degrees and theories. They need people who understand what it means to be broken and put yourself back together. They need proof that life after trauma is possible. Autumn felt the weight of the decision settling over her. Can we have time to think about it? She asked. Of course. I will return in the autumn for your answer. After Delphine left, the three women sat together in the meadow, surrounded by the scent of blooming lupine. Naya spoke first. If you do this, if you bring more girls here, I want to help. I want to be the one who shows them it is possible to heal. Autumn reached out, found Naya's hand and squeezed it. You have already done that just by surviving. But yes, if we do this, we do it together. That autumn, when Delphine returned, they gave her their answer. Yes, they would expand. Yes, they would take in more girls who needed safe harbor. Yes, they would teach what they had learned about survival and healing and building life from ashes. By the following spring, 2 more cabins had been built in the meadow, and 6 more girls had found their way to the mountains. Girls who had been sold, stolen, abused, abandoned. Girls who arrived broken and silent and certain they would never heal. And one by one, season by season, they learned what Autumn had learned 3 years earlier. That worth was not determined by what had been done to them. That blindness, injury, trauma, none of it made them less human or less deserving of life. That healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, that the future was not written in the scars of the past. On a clear morning in her 4th spring in the mountains, Autumn stood in the meadow surrounded by the sound of girls working, laughing, healing. She felt the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. And she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a platform in Cripple Creek where she had been worth 2 bits, to this meadow where she was priceless, where she helped others discover their own worth. She thought about Onawa, who had seen value where others saw only burden, who had offered freedom instead of ownership. And she thought about all the girls who would come after, who would arrive broken and leave whole, who would learn that they were not defined by their worst moments, but by their choice to survive them. Here, in this meadow surrounded by mountains and wildflowers, Autumn Merrick, who had once been blind and sold and forgotten, had become something the men who'd bought her could never have imagined. She had become hope.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.